It is good to be back, Colonials fans. After working through some renovations of our lovely studio, your favorite GW Sports recap show is back on the air. If you didn't already know, I'm your anchor, Sean Grant, and joining me here at the desk is my co-anchor, Cole Anchustegui. Cole, let's hear a quick rundown of what we got in store today.
Sean, this will be a great episode as we are discussing both fall and winter athletics. We will be breaking down the upcoming basketball seasons for both the men's and women's teams, and we will recap GW's performance this season for men's and women's soccer, men's water polo, women's volleyball, rowing, men's and women's cross country, and last but not least, men's and women's squash. Finally, Sean will get a chance to interview Terry Weir, the head coach for the men's and women's cross country team. All of this on Unstoppable.
Right wing, good. Dively leaking out.
The men's basketball season is now in full swing, and these young Colonials have already been tested. They handled Fairmont State with relative ease in an exhibition match, but they then took on a gritty Howard team at the Smith Center to officially tip off the regular season. GW edged out an 84-75 victory, but Howard fought hard until the end, and for a while, the outcome could have gone either way. GW struggled from the charity stripe, an issue dating back to last season, and they gave up 15 personal fouls for the entire game. The Colonials also struggled on the defensive side of the ball. The boys were able to pick up their free throw shooting in the next match against a much tougher opponent in Florida State, but they turned the ball over 19 times and only had 6 assisted baskets on a very poor shooting night. They eventually fell to FSU 87-67. Cole, what has stood out to you so far from the men's team?
So Fairmont State, mind you, a D3 school, was an interesting game. They had some early struggles, but they only turned the ball over 11 times, which is relatively good.
Well, and something else to note from that game, Cole, was Arnaldo Toro. He had 11 rebounds in that game, and given that this is a much smaller team than we've seen in years past, getting strong rebounding contributions from players like Toro is going to be critical from them. These older forwards are really going to have to pick it up, and so they can really work in some of those younger forwards and still have a strong rebounding effort. But in this game, we saw Patrick Steeves, now a player who's played for 6 years. He's a graduate transfer. He kind of disappeared in this game. He really wasn't a factor, and he's going to need to be a factor going forward. He's going to need to crash the glass, and he's going to need to have a presence in the paint. Again, like we said, with him and Toro, that'll really contribute to the Colonials' success if he can contribute.
Yeah, and Patrick Steeves really stepped up his performance in that Howard game. He was effective in the paint, he was effective in the post, and we saw that success contribute to their win. So GW won 84-75, and we saw another great contributive effort from Toro, who crashed the glass, and in total, GW racked up 41 team boards.
But something else we want to look at that game was they were not solid on the defensive end at all, and this could just be a factor of Coach Maurice Joseph is just working through some different defensive rotations. It could be a factor that these young players are not knowing when to switch and when to move without when they're not defending the ball. But this is something that they're really going to have to work on going forward, is this defensive consistency. If they're going to want to beat better teams, they can't be giving up 75 points to a team like Howard.
Yeah, we saw them struggle heavily on perimeter defense, whether it be switching for the pick and pop. Howard got a lot of offensive opportunities that just GW can't let happen in tougher competition.
And they also had 15 turnovers, and Bolden only had 2 assists for the game. Bolden is the floor general of this team and the best guard, and he needs to facilitate the team and lead them much better. He didn't have a ton of turnovers himself, but the lack of assists and his volume scoring output shows that while he's a talented scorer, I want to see him pass the ball more. He's shown creative passing and good court vision before, so I want to see him put that out more going forward.
And one positive thing to note from that game was the effort of Bo Ziegler. He was an absolute electric factory on the court. He was by far GW's most effective player. He threw down 3 alley-oops. He had an awesome slam dunk in transition. He got the crowd going. He got GW moving. So his effort going forward is going to be really important to GW's success.
Yep. And going on to that FSU game now, Cole, they lost 87-67, and this really wasn't a surprise given how they played. They shot very poorly from the floor, and that was coupled with 19 turnovers on only 6 assisted baskets, like I said in the recap. And if you just listen to that statistic alone, you would expect a team to lose. That's just not a way you're going to be able to beat these better teams. Now, turnovers can be expected when you have some young players playing, but again, only those 6 assisted baskets. I again look to Jair Bolden to really pick it up there, and he's got to be making better passes going forward.
And then, as we talked about defense, FSU shot a scorching 62% from the floor. And if you have a team putting up those numbers, there's no way you're going to win.
Now, and one thing we did see from this game that was a positive was the output from Terry Nolan Jr., one of our highly touted freshmen. He had a breakout game with 18 points on 8 of 12 shooting, so that's definitely a positive going forward. But I'd like to see him put that effort out there, in a winning effort when we can see good contributions from some of the more veteran players as well. A couple of things that I want to look for going forward is how Maurice Joseph continues to play with the lineup and which freshmen are going to get playing time. Like we've already mentioned, Terry Nolan Jr., very talented player. I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot of him. But with some of those freshman forwards we haven't seen a lot of, for guys like Toro and Steves, while we need them to be on the court, it's also taxing to be banging in the paint so consistently. So working in some of those younger forwards to give our older forwards a rest is going to be critical as well. I want to see how that defensive consistency improves. We've harped on that through these first 3 games for them. They really need to get their switches down. They need to find a scheme that works for them. As a smaller team, they might end up going with some kind of zone that really takes away the paint from the opposing team, but they're just going to have to find something that works for them. And lastly, I want to see if the Colonials can continue to rebound as a team. We've seen strong individual efforts, but we haven't seen them rebound collectively as a group, and that means the guards, the wing players, all getting in on it and contributing to that as well.
Yeah, so all things going forward that we need to look for the Colonials. So swinging things across the court now to women's basketball, who are off to a slow start to begin their season. After falling to the Princeton Tigers 72-51 in their first game of the season, the women also dropped a tough one to South Dakota State Jackrabbits 97-88 in overtime. The Colonials have seen strong scoring performances from senior forward Kelly Prange, but as a team, GW has not rebounded well. Frequent turnovers have also hurt them, as Coach Rosati has tried to figure out which lineup to go with going forward. Sean, what have you seen in these first couple games?
Well, if we want to break it down game by game, Cole, we first got to look at that Princeton game, and they were simply outmatched in this game. They lost 72-51. They were out-rebounded 42-31. Now, Kelly Prange, a senior forward that we talked about in that recap, a very strong player. She's had some good contributions, especially scoring output, like you said. But in that first game, she only had 6 rebounds, and she was out-rebounded by both of the other Princeton forwards. 6 rebounds, not a bad total, but she is the tallest player on this team, and she's the most veteran, and she needs to be leading by example and showing these younger players what it means to crash the glass and grab rebounds. And her rebound output is going to be critical for how this team is able to compete on the glass. And if they want to have, if they're going to shoot, this team shoots a lot of the 3 ball. If they want to do that, they're going to need to grab offensive rebounds to give themselves some second chance points.
Yeah, it's not a one-man show though, so other players have to get involved in that defensive effort, and then this will in turn affect offense output as well. But it's important to note 16 team turnovers that game, and Milan only had 2, but all the starters had at least 2. So this is pretty comprehend, given that these players have played together for roughly about 2 years now. So you really want to see that team chemistry be there, but it's just not clicking.
Yeah, and they also had 18 team fouls. That's pretty high, and coupled with the turnovers, that's a ton of free points. You're giving up points at the line. You're giving up points in transition off of the turnovers. So considering all of that together, it's really not a surprise why they lost this first game. It is the first game, so they can definitely iron out some things going forward. But we did see a couple of problems, that we saw in that first game crop up in the second game against South Dakota State. They were much more competitive in that game, that 97-88 overtime loss, but they had 16 turnovers. Mei Lin had 11 assists in this game, and that combated that to some degree. But the other players are still just turning the ball over, and so it doesn't do the team any good if Mei Lin is able to pass some of the time, but the rest of the time her team is turning the ball over. Those are lost opportunities there. If you could cut that number in half and turn 8 of those turnovers into baskets, it's a totally different game here. And they just did not rebound well as a team. Had 30 rebounds. Prange picked it up. She had 10 rebounds. And we had a freshman, Nila Luma, who had 7. But again, talking about rebounding as a team, that's something we harped on with the men's team as well. They need to do it a lot better. And if you're just having 2 players grab a majority of your rebounds, it's really just not going to be a recipe for success.
I want to see more offensive production too that's efficient. They threw up a lot of three-pointers that were unwarranted, and those bad possessions really impacted GW, and you shouldn't be losing to a team like South Dakota State. So the turnovers, the overall chemistry, we need to see improvements on those going forward. And the team did bring in 4 freshmen, so I want to see them get more involved, and I want to see what they can contribute to the team. And maybe switching up the lineups in that sense will help GW see success.
Well, and one more thing, though, that I want to look at, Cole, is the playing time of Camilla Tapias. She is a senior guard, the only other senior on the team along with Kelly Prange, and she's only played a handful of minutes in each of the first few games. Kind of surprising, really. She's a strong three-point shooter, which, as we said, something they like to do, but something that they've struggled to do so far this season. There could be a variety of reasons why she's not getting the playing time. Coach Rosati could just be wanting to play around with that rotation, like you said, and she knows that Tapias, as a senior, can be inserted into the lineup at any point and still contribute. But there could be something else going on, too. I'm interested to see. Maybe she's working back from an injury, but really we're unsure, and we'll have to see how her playing time fluctuates going forward.
Passing it through to men's soccer now, where the boys' season ended with a 1-0 loss to Rhode Island in the Atlantic 10 Championship. For the year, the Colonials finished with a 9-7-2 record overall and an impressive 6-2 record in conference. The boys seemed ready to roll into the playoffs after winning 6 out of their last 7 games, but they simply could not pull it off against Rhode Island. What's even more impressive is the fact that for the season, the boys were only shut out twice and only lost by 3 or more goals twice. This showcases just how gritty the team's style of play was. They were competitive in just about every match. They should be encouraged for the future as well, as 2 of their leading scorers, Oscar Haynes-Brown and Brady O'Connor, are only freshmen.
Well, now, Cole, touching on that 9-7-2 record, it's not bad. It's not great. You'd like to see it be a little bit better. Hovering right around 500. It could have gone either way, and that's something that we saw last season too. They had a very similar record, but that 6-2 record in conference, incredibly encouraging to see. And they made a push right at the end of the season. They beat VCU, Davidson, Duquesne, and St. Joe's. They won 6 out of their last 7 games, all of them in conference. And so when you're making that push towards that Atlantic 10 championship game tournament, it's just incredibly impressive to see that you're beating that competition you're going to play in that tournament. It's a shame to see that it didn't pan out in that game. Very tough loss to Rhode Island. But they have some things to be encouraged about for the future, as we've said.
Yeah, when looking at the record, keep in mind that they were incredibly competitive. They were only shut out twice, they only lost by 3 or more goals twice, and they played in 3 overtime games, 2 of which ended in ties in double overtime.
Another thing to note, as we've said, we've talked about those young freshmen. We've talked about them a lot. They do have 5 seniors who are going to graduate. Most of them are offensive players, so it doesn't seem to be a huge deal given that they have contributors on that end. But GW will lose a cornerstone of its defense in Ben Ogudegbe. They're going to need to find someone who can pick up his slack. And we saw in some of these games, in some of these close overtime games, that defense and their goalkeeping was something that they relied on. So hopefully with the development of those young freshmen, we can see some more goals scored, but they're also going to need to figure something out on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how O'Connor and Haynes-Brown develop too. As we said, only freshmen. They have a lot of time at GW, and it's going to be great to see their development, and it's great to going to be able to see what they can contribute in the future.
Centering it to the women's soccer team now, who finished out an impressive season with a heartbreaking double overtime loss to Duquesne in the opening round of the Atlantic 10 Championships. The women finished with a strong 10-5-4 record and came into the postseason scorching hot, just like the men's team, only losing 1 game in their last 8 contests. Miranda Horn, the redshirt senior, carried the team with her phenomenal goalkeeping all season long as she racked up 10 shutouts and only let up more than 3 goals in 1 game.
Yeah, Miranda Horn was absolutely incredible. On average, she would stop 5 to 7 goals, highlighting just how good of a keeper that she is. And GW relied on this defensive presence heavily. Defense was their main force on their team, and we saw this in a lot of their games.
And they should be encouraged going forward to next season. They do lose Horn, but there's only 1 other senior on the roster, and so they'll be returning most of this core group of people that they played this entire season, so they should be encouraged by that. The offense will need to pick things up next season. They won't be able to rely on the shutouts provided by Horn, and there was only 2 games in this season where they scored more than 2 goals, so definitely we'll want to see some more offensive output from them, but lots of reasons to be happy for the future.
Yeah, now let's talk about that loss to Duquesne. It was a back and forth defensive battle. One team did not control the ball for the majority of the time, and Horn saved 8 out of 9 shots by Duquesne, and she just stood on her head throughout that entire contest.
Well, and another thing we should note is that defense that we touched on. They only allowed 1 shot on goal from Duquesne until the 39th minute. So almost to that entire first half, really making things a lot easier for Horn. And when you're going into a double overtime game, you don't want your goalie to be taxed the entire time. So a good job from the defense in that game, but the offense just couldn't get it going. Duquesne's defense stifled them, and the offense only had 4 shots on goal for the entire game. They didn't get a friendly bounce. So, when that happens, a tough loss for the women, but, you need more shots on goal. You need a little bit more offensive output.
Let's toss it into the pool now with men's water polo, where the boys are looking to make a deep postseason run as the 2 seed in the MAWPC Championship. After a tough run in the Harvard Invitational, where they lost to Brown, Princeton, St. Francis Brooklyn, and Harvard, GW finished their regular season on a 4-game win streak. In that stretch, they took down tough opponents like Johns Hopkins, Navy, Wagner, and Fordham, pushing their overall record to 14-11. First-year head coach Barry King has played around with the lineups all season long and seems to have found some chemistry among his boys.
Well, now, Cole, you're absolutely right to bring up that chemistry and those, playing around with those lineups. Chemistry is a critical factor for this team. They have a host of young talent that Coach King has barely even scratched the surface with so far this season. You've got players like freshmen like Kiram Shishmanalu and Andras Levy. You've got sophomores Andrew Mavis, who was their top scorer this year, and Adekon Destici. Adekon Destici is a name we've referenced quite frequently on this show. He was an electric scorer last year as a freshman. He put up some mind-boggling numbers, but this season he's found a bunch of other ways to contribute, and he's really displayed some fantastic vision and passing. He's contributed around 4 to 6 assists in just about every game so far this season, so it's a real show of maturity for him that as a sophomore he has such a well-rounded game.
Yeah, he's played great. And I guess my barometer for maturity as a player is really getting other people involved. And we've seen him do that. And that's going to continue going forward. And he needs to realize that it's his team and he just needs to take over. So continue to look for that. And also for the play of Mavis, it has been fantastic also. He's a young player who really stepped up, scored anywhere between 2 to 6 goals in nearly every single game that he played.
And that combination of Mavis and Destici is really, really strong. And if you can kind of get some good chemistry between them going forward where they're passing to each other, you could really see some creative offensive output from this team. So hopefully that chemistry we touched on will help them heading into the MAWPC Championship. They've handled most of the teams they've played with relative ease. They've played in a lot of strong games, but against some of that tougher competition, like we said in the Harvard Invitational, they struggled on occasion. So that relying on that chemistry and trusting in each other is really going to be big for them if they want to make a deep postseason run this year. Now, let's jump out of the pool and onto the court with women's volleyball, who have really struggled all season long. After a rocky 2-8 start, the team picked it up to some degree, but were still inconsistent and finished their regular season play with a 10-20 record. A glaring issue for the Colonials was their performance on the road, as they were 2-10 away from the Smith Center as opposed to 6-8 when they had the home court advantage. The team played moderately well down the stretch, however, going 4-4 in their last 8 games, and they managed to clinch a spot in the A10 tournament, where they will face off against St. Louis in the first round later today.
Yeah, so in every single match that the Colonials played, it was either lopsided towards GW or lopsided towards their opponent. They either lost 3-0 or won 3-0. So just the inconsistency was tough to see.
Yeah, and when you're looking at those box scores and you see that 3-0 either in a victory or 3-0 in a loss, it shows you're either much better than the teams that you're playing or you're much worse. There's not a consistent level of competition, and that's something you would really kind of hope to see, especially when you're playing in a conference with so many other schools that you play against regularly. You'd like to see more competitive matchups. You want to see box scores that are 3-2 or even 3-1. You want to see some more consistent competition out of them. This team definitely has some stuff to improve on going forward. Hopefully, they're still in the Atlantic 10 Championship tournament this weekend. They still have a chance to head into the offseason with some momentum if they can pick up some strong victories. So, we'll really hope to see some of that stuff from them. We're going to go to a quick commercial break now, but when we return, we'll finish up our roundup. So stay tuned.
Welcome back. Let's hop in the boats now with men's rowing, where the men had a strong showing in several regattas this fall. In the historic Head of the Charles Regatta up in Boston, Massachusetts, the top four-person boat got 5th place in the championship, 4 category, competing against top programs like Harvard, Princeton, as well as U.S. national team boats. They had another four-person boat in that same race that passed 12 crews on their way to a 6th place finish. Congratulations to Unstoppable's own Matt Kerwin, who helped power that boat to victory. Another highlight of the season was when the men placed 9th in the Princeton Chase, an open 8 boat event. Congratulations to the boys for a strong fall season, and we look for more from them in this spring.
The women's rowing team performed just as strongly as the men's team did, with impressive performances in critical regattas throughout the fall. They opened up by finishing right behind some of the best teams in the country to place 3rd in the Navy Day Regatta, their best finish ever. They then went on to place 16th out of 40 boats at the Princeton Chase, another memorable performance for the women. They then rounded out fall competition by having 3 boats placed in the top 10 at the Head of the Oconquan Regatta. Congratulations to the women's rowing team for a strong showing, and hopefully that momentum rolls into spring competition.
Now let's lace up those cleats and get out to the track with the men's cross country team, where the boys performed very well this fall. They got off to a hot start, placing 2nd out of 7 teams in the William & Mary Invitational and 2nd out of 18 teams in the Paul Short Invitational. The team did not place as well in their next 2 meets, but they stormed back in the Atlantic 10 Championship, moving all the way from 10th place to 3rd place in an incredible finish. All 5 of GW's scoring runners placed in the top 30, and Matt Lang, Carter Day led the way, placing 6th and 11th overall respectively. Our own Andy Weber also posted a career best placement in the meet. The boys went on to place 14th out of 28 teams in the NCAA Mid-Atlantic Region competition to round out the fall season. Andy Weber set another PR with his time in that race. Quite a banner fall for Andy. Congratulations to the men's team on such a successful fall, and we'll expect great things once track season starts up.
The women's cross-country team also showed that they could run with the best. They got off to a hot start just like the men's team did, placing 4th out of 8 teams in the William & Mary Invitational and 2nd out of 16 teams at the Paul Short Invitational. They did not place as well in the meets in the middle part of their season, but just like the men's team did, they had a strong showing in the Atlantic 10 Championship, placing 6th out of 14 teams. The Colonials were led in that meet by junior Madison Yerke, who clinched all conference honors with her 14th place finish. The women then rounded out the fall season at the Mid-Atlantic Regional Competition, where they placed 16th out of 28 teams. Congratulations to the Colonials on a strong fall season, and just like with the men, we look forward to seeing them in track season. Later in the show, I'll get a chance to sit down with Terry Weir, the head coach for both the men's and women's teams, to discuss the successes of this season. So stay tuned for that.
Men's and women's squash both got their seasons underway recently, and both are off to strong starts. The men's squad manhandled William & Mary and Bucknell in their first 2 contests, winning both 9 matches to none. The women won their first and only match so far this season, defeating Princeton 6-3. Both teams host Trinity College in Connecticut, the #1 ranked men's team and the #3 ranked women's team tomorrow morning and afternoon, so we'll look to see how they perform. Our own Matt Kerwin caught up with the women's team after a hard practice.
The George Washington women's squash team is about to start their 2017-2018 season. Co-captain Mary Jo Mahfoud is confident for the path ahead.
It's been great. We've had a really strong preseason. We actually got 5 new freshman girls who all bring a new component to the team, and we're really excited to see them perform throughout their matches and through the season. Looking forward to, being really strong in the B division and hopefully conquering it this year.
Coach Wendy Lawrence is in her 11th season with the Colonials and is confident.
We are much stronger than before, primarily because the 5 new women we got on our team fill in a lot of the gaps, especially toward the bottom of the ladder, where we were a little bit weaker last year. So 4 out of the 5 freshmen will be playing in the top 9.
Blending together is co-captain Abby Shanrock's goal.
First off, start working more cohesively as a unit. Like Mary said, we need to win 5 matches. Doesn't matter where those 5 matches come from. It matters that 5 people win, and so we're really looking forward to improve our fitness, improve our technique, on and off the court, cohesiveness.
Coach Lawrence believes the biggest obstacle for the team is
It's a really long season for us. We start practicing in the middle of September, and our last match is the first week in March. So we span most of both semesters, and so the biggest trick for us is to stay injury-free.
let's hope the Colonials get that top 10 ranking. For all of us at Unstoppable, I'm Matt Kerwin.
Thanks, Matt. We're going to go to a short commercial break now, but don't go anywhere because when we return, Sean will sit down with Coach Terry Weir of the men's and women's cross-country teams.
Raise high. This isn't just our battle cry. It's our call, our challenge. Because when you are called to Washington, you are called to higher expectations, to a higher standard. We are called here to advance knowledge, to serve society, to change the world. This is the George Washington University, and what we make is history. So stand up, be bold, take risks, press on, push harder, raise high.
Great journalism matters because it's critical to a democracy that the public is informed and engaged and involved. And that happens by having credible information. And so the most important thing, whatever the delivery platform, whatever the technology, whatever the business model, is that the information itself is coming in solid and important ways and is being conveyed in compelling ways because there's so much noise and competition out there. And so that's what I really want our students to be able to do, be brilliant storytellers, keen observers, and compelling communicators.
For many athletes, running is a punishment or a necessity, never something one would do for pure enjoyment. For Terry Weir, however, running is a passion rooted so deep that it motivates him to set new boundaries. A professional runner who trained for the 1996 Olympic trials, Weir's love for running turned into a passion for coaching after his professional career finished. Now entering his 7th season as the head coach for the men's and women's cross-country teams and his 4th season at the helm of the men's and women's track teams, Coach Weir's mark is already apparent. Both the men's and women's cross-country teams garnered regional rankings from the USTF CCCA for the first time in program history during the 2016 cross-country season, and they have not looked back since then, continuing the upward trajectory. Most recently, the men's cross-country team posted a fantastic 3rd place finish at the Atlantic 10 Championships. Coach Weir joins me now in the studio. Coach, thanks for being here.
I can't believe it's already been 7 years.
Coach, just to start off, could you talk a little bit about your training for the Olympic trials in 1996, just to give some insight into your own running career?
I remember it was really hard, but you know, it was probably one of the best years of my running life for sure. It was just out of high school or college, and we're actually based here in DC, out of Georgetown. There's about 4 or 5 Olympians at the time, and it was just a crazy experience. The great thing now about training with the team now is we train at a lot of the same places where I trained, down at the polo fields or on the canal, or even up at the track at Georgetown. So it's fun that way. But yeah, looking back at it, it's a lot of hard running. But I learned a lot from running with those guys, and from overtraining to competing at the highest level. So I think it's put a lot of perspective in my coaching.
So looking at those differences, I mean, how different do you think coaching cross country is as opposed to competing?
There's a lot of similarities, but there's also there's a ton of difference too. The similarities is you got to be very, very patient, and probably even more so now as a coach than I was as an athlete. You know, I think, you know, when we go to the meets, I still get excited. I still get the butterflies in my stomach that it did when I was lining up on the line. And even more so now that we have about 50 athletes, and now every single one of them lines up, I get that feeling for each of them because I see the kind of work that they're doing and putting in. So it's a little bit easier as an athlete. It was just me that I had to worry about. Now it's 50, so it's a little different that way.
How would you describe your coaching style?
Andy would have a good one on that one. You know, I think I am fairly patient, but I am very passionate about what I do, and that definitely comes out. You know, there's an intensity that has to be on the track, and So sometimes you got to keep that intensity there, and so there's some kicking and screaming sometimes with that. But it's it's very much a developmental type of program, and I try to be as patient as we can with it, and we've been getting some very good results.
And more in the day-to-day side of coaching, especially with a sport like cross country or track, where it's so focused on the individual performances. How does one go about coaching a sport like that? Is it really all in the way that you motivate your players, the example you set? From your experience, what have you found for that?
Honestly, it's got to start with them. It's got to, we can show them A to B or A to D. There's a whole bunch of different ways to coach someone. But what I can't give them, and I tell them, I can't give them heart, and so it has to start with there, and they've got to want to do this. And it's it's a tough sport, and it's a sport that on one day you can be on top of the world, you can win, you can break a record, you can be the A10 champion or NCAA champion, or Olympic champion, and the next day someone comes out and beats you pretty good, and you're right back down at the bottom again. Yeah. So it's a very humbling. It humbles you very, very quickly.
So talking more specifically about the team you have now, what has been the key to transforming this program into one that's regionally recognized and regionally ranked?
It's when I first got here, we were just a cross-country only program, and to the department's credit, they sat down and said, hey, how can we get a little bit better in cross-country, and really just kind of educate them a little bit. We really had to have a full track, full season program, pretty much with everyone else in the A10 has, and just to be competitive. We were going to attract that same student athlete, the same student that GW attracts. If we want that same student athlete here, we have to give them the opportunity to compete with the best of the NCAA year round. And our AD, Patrick Nero, listened, and I was just happy to listen to a track coach. And it was amazing. A lot of people put a lot of things together, and I ran a proposal up to the president of the university and got it done. So by adding that, that was just a little over, we're going into our 4th year, I believe, for a full track and field program or track program. And that's what really kind of jump-started everything. And so I kind of feel like, honestly, that we're really in our 4th year of a program. That's kind of how I look at it. Even though we had cross-country before and we had some success before I got here with some individuals. But as a team, really to have a competitive team, we needed that track component.
How important was Ryan Tucker in that transformation?
Ryan was the first one that really kind of like bought into what I was saying and the vision of what we had, and it was big, and he was one of the first ones that really kind of broke through and made a big splash for us on our guys' side. So for me personally, it was great to see him grow and do as well as he did. And I wish he was here for all the years that we had track, because I think he would have had a bigger bump, and he would have done some great things on the track for us all 4 years too.
Now, talking more about the runners you have on your team now, like our executive producer Andy Weber, how have you seen them develop over their time at GW?
This group has done a great job. I mean, it's fantastic, and I say it all the time in this development, nothing's ever linear, right? It's always, you're going to have some ups and you're going to have some downs. And this group's definitely had some ups and downs, but overall, I couldn't be happier how quickly a lot of them have developed. Andy in particular, this was a great year for him. I know he's busy with what he does here. He's a fantastic student, along with everyone on both teams are fantastic students. But particularly this year, he had a big breakthrough year, and it really, really kind of helped our men. And looking even forward to next year, Andy will be now a senior for us and be leading that program.
Now, how do you feel about how the men's and women's teams have both performed so far this season?
Great. The men was, for the last couple of years, we thought we should have made a bigger jump than we did. For some reason, we just didn't do it at the A10 meet. But I saw it coming. We're just waiting for it. I thought it was going to happen last year and even the year before last, when Ryan was 3rd as an individual in the race. So, but this year, I think seniors. These guys have been together for all 4 years. They've seen what it was 4 years ago, and they knew they were a good team. And so I think of depth. We finally got some really good depth in there, and that definitely contributed. And I think with some of our senior leaders, Chris Schaefer being our captain, he provided a lot of great leadership for us this year. And and we also had a grad transfer student, Matt Lang, who just brought a different perspective. He came from Furman, who was a top 30 team, and who's been on a team who's been very successful. And he knew how good we were too. And so I think all these things coming together, and then really just them believing and going out and just doing it. And I think that was the biggest thing. And it was the exciting part for the men was we were just with a mile to go. We were winning the race. We're up in front. And credit to Dayton just running a great last mile to win. But we're never in a race like that before. And so really the nice thing about having that depth is if you can take our top guy out, we're still third. Or if we take our fifth guy out, we score 1 through 5. We're still third, and that's how tight and how deep we were this year. And I think that's a key component. And on the women's side, we made that jump up from we were 10th and 11th for a couple years, and we made that jump a couple years ago up to the top half of the conference, which was a good breakthrough for the women. And I thought we could. This year we didn't have Miranda, our top girl, but I thought we had other girls really step up very, very well and run great. And this allowed this year to have some new girls to kind of step in that varsity role that haven't got a shot to do that. So this year was a really good learning experience for those girls. And the nice thing about them is that we got all of them all coming back next year. So we'll have a very strong women's team next year.
And what was your assessment of how things went in the Mid-Atlantic Regional, the next step up for them? You guys obviously performed very well at the Atlantic 10 Championships, but then went on to the regional competition. So how do you feel like your athletes performed there?
No, I thought we did well. It's hard when you come into you come up from a big high from a championship meet like the A10s. You got to bring yourself back down, and then you got to get yourself back up. We have a little two week break, and then you got to come back up. And I thought we prepared as well as we could, and we did. And we ran well. We didn't run as well as we didn't run as great as we did at A10. But we still had a lot of guys run PR. The difference is going from the A10 to the regional meet is now we go from 8K, 5 miles, up to 10K to 6 miles. So it's a little different length there. And so, and we don't have a whole lot of experience in that. But I thought we handled it well. A lot of guys ran the best they ever did. And we finished the best we ever did. But I thought we came in 14th, we were ranked 11th, and we definitely thought we could run where our ranking was.
And how do you think that success, both in the A10s and in the regional competition, how do you think that's going to translate into the track season?
Oh, great. I mean, listen, both a lot of men and women are really, really, they're fit, and they're strong, and that just translates over to track. We say all the time is, you want to run great in track, you have to have an awesome cross-country season. And it kind of goes vice versa too. If to build on cross country, you want to run well on the track. So, I'm really, really looking forward to it. I think a lot of them are really looking forward to the track as well too. They know they're fit.
All right, well, Coach, thank you so much for joining us here on the show. Best of luck to you in your track season. We're going to go to a short commercial break now, but please stay tuned because when we come back, Andy Weber will join us here at the desk to clue you in on which games you should be watching in the upcoming weeks. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. We are now joined at the desk by our executive producer, the sensational, the conversational, the irreplaceable Andy Weber. Andy, what do you have for us?
Cole, you're too kind. We may have been off the air for a few months, but your favorite Colonial teams have been hard at work. Here are some of the games you need to be at in the coming weeks. On November 20th, men's basketball will be facing Rider for the second round of the Las Vegas Invitational. They will take on the Broncos at 7 p.m. at Smith. After we get back from Thanksgiving break, men's and women's squash will host Virginia on November 28th. Matches start at 4 p.m. at the Hellwell Squash Courts. Men's basketball will be back at Smith the next day, Wednesday, November 29th at 7 p.m. They play host to Morgan State. For all GW home basketball games, remember to visit the GWTV Facebook page for live pregame, halftime, and postgame coverage. Guys?
Well, thanks, Andy. That's all the sports we could cram into one show for today. Thanks for tuning in.
And as always, don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We'll see you next time.